So a great way to start, instead of trying to bite off more than you can chew at the beginning, is by painting smaller. So I take a canvas and I put tape across it, make it into 4 canvases. I think they ended up being about 6 by 8 or around that, and worry much more about relationships than worrying about the brushwork and technique. So as you can see in this one, that this is the finished product. I'm going to show these first because there's a big difference working in the studio and outside as far as filming. There's a lot of factors of sun and glare and clouds coming over and wind. And so as you're watching, if you see that the color's a little off because of the glare or a shadow or anything coming across my canvas, you can see what the end product was. Of course, I have not touched this. This was the finished product that I had outside. But if you look at this one and the next one, because I'll do 2 of these quick studies, notice how I'm trying to hold the values to 2 or 3, and that I'm looking for the temperature variation within those values. As you can see, the different colors in the rock and in the water, while still holding it as a complete value. If I take, like if you notice in the water how it's going from blues to green, if you squint, those values stay relatively close. If those values get too far away, then the white water is not going to look like white water. And a big mistake everybody makes is painting water far too light. Water is more like a jewel, a gem, and you need to paint it as if you were painting an emerald, because you wouldn't paint an emerald pasty and light. You paint it, rich and full of color. So these are the 2 beginnings as you'll see me develop these. I've reduced the time in these studies. They were about 25 to 30 minutes each. I think that's a good range, 20 minutes to 30 minutes quick studies on these. But these are just color notes. That's all I'm worried about. You're not trying to put these in a museum, gallery. You're just trying to take down enough notes and color relationships to get a better understanding. And as I said at the beginning of the course, you're far better doing 100 starts or 100 small paintings than you are doing, a big 30 by 40, 50 by 60 epic finished painting when you're still, or I am still, anyone is still struggling with getting relationships. So I'll let you watch, and I will also comment in areas that I feel are important to comment. One thing to notice, and nice in this one that I showed my palette, so you can see the mixing along with the painting. And look how dark that looks on my canvas. But when you see it on my palette, can you see it's not black? It actually looks a little lighter than it really did in real life on the palette there, but it's still not going all the way to black. The other thing is separating your palette into different values. So I try to keep my darker values on the left, my lighter values on the right, and my mid values in the middle. In my studio, my palette is very large, so it's easy to just keep them up there all the time. Painting out on location, I do have to take my palette knife and scrape it down to constantly make room. But you can see I mix into the piles. I think quite often people think you need to always make these fresh, clean, separated piles. But if you do, you're going to lack color harmony. Mixing into those piles is what creates the harmony. And by mixing into it, I'm knowing that my value is keeping relatively in the same range. I'm doing everything I talk about in my temperature lesson, but I'm doing it with my pigment. If you watch me mix, it's just going a little bit warmer, a little bit. I'm picking a primary, though it might not. I'm not painting it fully red, but I'm leaning it red or I'm leaning it green. And in the end product, you can see that there's all these slight temperature variations, and those are going to help show planes. But if I take the values too far, it's going to break up my whole composition. So that's why temperature is a great way to build once you have your value design. As I'm painting, one thing that when people are just starting to paint, their question is, what should I do next? That's a real easy question as long as there's white canvas. For me, the thing I do next is, where is the white canvas? The first thing I want to do is cover that canvas and get all the relationships down. Because as I've talked about, I may not be right, but I am certain. I do want to put them down because I don't know if they're correct until they're down. The decision is partially made on my palette, but it's not completely made until they're there. And if I have big white gaps or halos around certain shapes or colors, that means the decision hasn't fully been made. Or if I have one half of the painting is left white, it means there's no decisions there. So don't hold off on those decisions. And as we talked about with the eye fatigue, that when you look, make that decision, paint it, put it in. Don't think in 10 minutes or 20 minutes you're going to make a better decision. Make it now and then correct it if it's wrong. This is an area on the coastline about 20 minutes south of my studio. Great cliffs. It's just the beginning of a big surf and just this incredible meeting of land and sea. But it does come with its difficulties. There's so much to paint there that it's really easy to kind of get overwhelmed and try to paint too much instead of picking an area and painting it. Also, one important thing with painting is every painting's about something. Don't try to make it about everything. Decide what it's about, follow that goal till the end, and then move on to the next. And in this area, the mountains are so great. The ocean is wonderful. The rocks and cliffs and surf are great. So I tend to want to paint the mountains and the ocean and just get far too much into my painting. But on these, both of these paintings, I zoomed in into one area and just picked some cliffs that are cascading into the ocean. You can see here, on the small painting, I'm not concerned about brushwork. I hope there's good brushwork, but the brushwork, a lot comes from putting the right value and the right temperature and the right shape in the right place with confidence. So now, as you can see, I'm taking my flat brush, and it's fairly large for the area. I think this is number 8, if you're familiar with the brush sizes. So it's a pretty big square shape, but you can see I'm maneuvering it to go smaller and thinner, more colorographic strokes, and then big blocky plane changes. And just subtle variations of temperature and building this light area, the different planes, and just developing it further. Putting down the first kind of blocky shapes and then coming and refining. And this being a real quick study, I only refine it to a certain extent. The longer the painting, if I was out here spending 2 hours, 3 hours on a painting, then the details would be much more refined. But this is really about getting color relationships and color notes. Surprisingly, you may find as well, some of your brushwork happens in these little quick paintings because you're not focusing on it. You're focusing on the right things. And you can see we can resolve the problems fairly quickly. That it might seem quick to you to think you're going to go outside and paint a 25-minute painting on location, but with the small format, you're seeing kind of the whole thing at once and really developing these relationships rather than getting into the minutia and how does this plants work, how is exactly these pieces of cliff. No, it's just the large relationships. And this, to me, is far more difficult than doing like the refinement of a branch or things at the end of a painting. Sometimes that's just the flick of a brush, where relationships take time.